You stand in front of a heavy wooden counter at the local hardware store. Or maybe you are browsing a glossy catalog sent to your mailbox, looking at a gleaming stainless steel dehydrator. It has digital buttons, 6 chrome shelves, an internal fan that hums like a small refrigerator, and a price tag of $240. The manual promises it will preserve your summer harvest perfectly, keeping your apples, herbs, and venison jerky safe for the winter months. You look at your wallet, you look at the machine, and you wonder if this is the only way left to keep food from spoiling. Now, stop and think about this. For thousands of years, before copper wires ever carried a current into a kitchen, our ancestors kept their harvests intact through the darkest, dampest winters. They did not have fans, they did not have digital thermostats, and they certainly did not spend $200 to save $20 worth of plums. Yet, when January arrived, their cellars were full of deeply flavored, leathery fruits and dried strips of meat that never saw a speck of mold. They used something so simple, so quiet, and so entirely free that modern manufacturing has spent 50 years trying to make you forget it even exists. Understand this. The machine does not dry the food. Air does. And nature has a way of moving air that requires no electricity at all. I saw this myself when I was a boy helping my grandfather in his workshop during the late weeks of August. The air outside was thick enough to drink, the kind of Pennsylvania humidity that makes your shirt stick to your back. Inside the old curing shed, however, it was different. It felt cool, a gentle draft constantly moving across the floor and up through the rafters. There were no fans clicking away. On the slatted wooden tables lay hundreds of pounds of sliced redundant apples, turning a beautiful deep golden brown, soft as soft leather to the touch, smelling faintly of cider and old wood. My grandfather did not buy expensive equipment. He built a simple wooden box, no bigger than a small trunk, using scrap pine and a few pieces of woven wire cloth. That box did the exact same work as the $240 stainless steel machine, using nothing but the rising heat of the sun and the natural weight of the atmosphere. Now, I must be honest with you about the limits of this old way. If you are looking to dry 10 pounds of beef jerky in 3 hours during a torrential downpour, this method will fail you. It requires patience. It takes 2 days, sometimes 3, depending on what the sky looks like. It will not give you perfectly uniform, bright white apple rings, like the ones you buy in plastic pouches at the supermarket, because we do not use sulfur dioxide gas to bleach the fruit. The slices will turn dark, the color of old parchment. But the flavor? The flavor concentrates until a single slice tastes like an entire tree's harvest pressed into one bite. Why do we pay for electricity every single year to do what the sun and the wind are begging to do for us for free? How did our people live comfortably for 3 centuries in this valley without a single power line? While our modern pantries rely entirely on a grid that can blink out during the first winter storm? The answer lies in a simple law of nature that the old builders understood down to their bones. It is the principle of the solar chimney. When you look at an old barn, you see a small cupola sitting high on the roofline. It is not there for decoration. The old-timers knew that warm air naturally expands and rises, becoming lighter than the cold air beneath it. By building a specific structure, a simple dark-painted channel oriented toward the southern sky, you create a powerful, silent vacuum. The sun heats the air inside the channel. That air rushes upward to escape, and in doing so, it pulls a constant, steady stream of fresh, dry air from the bottom of the box, right across your sliced fruit. It is a beautiful piece of design because it regulates itself. The hotter the sun shines, the faster the air moves, which is exactly what the fruit needs on a scorching afternoon. When the sun goes down, the movement slows, allowing the fruit to rest without case ice hardening. A common problem with modern electric dehydrators, where the outside of the food dries too fast and traps moisture inside, causing the whole batch to rot in the jar a month later. If you examine the records from the early agricultural societies of Lancaster County, or look at the sketches left by pioneers who crossed the mountains with nothing but an axe and an iron pot, you find these passive solar dryers everywhere. They were made from old packing crates, charcoal blackened boards, and scraps of linen cloth. Today, modern universities, including researchers at several agricultural extension offices, have tested these exact historical designs against commercial electric units. The science confirms what the old folks knew by touch. A properly proportioned passive solar collector can reach internal temperatures of 140 degrees Fahrenheit while maintaining an airflow rate that prevents any bacterial growth, all without a single moving part. Imagine standing in your own yard on a warm August morning. You have a basket of fresh peaches from the tree by the well, or maybe some summer mushrooms gathered from the woods. Instead of turning on an appliance that heats up your kitchen and hums in your ear all weekend, you walk out to the woodpile. You pick up a few short lengths of common pine boards, a small sheet of glass from an old window pane, and a piece of black cloth. You are about to build something that will cost you less than a single value meal at a roadside restaurant, but it will serve your family for 20 years. You place the first board on the workbench, take up your handsaw, and prepare to make the 3 specific cuts that determine the exact angle needed to capture the noon sun. You have the tools ready, the wood laid out, and the old proportions in your mind. Let me show you exactly how to measure the frame so the air flows correctly, and how we prepare the wood so it draws the heat without burning the fruit. The secret to making this solar box work is not the size of the wood, but the slope of the glass. Stop and think about this for a second. The sun is not a fixed light in the ceiling. It changes its height in the sky every single day as the seasons turn. If you build your box perfectly flat, the summer sun will bounce right off the glass. If you build it perfectly vertical, the autumn's sun will pass right over it. To find the exact angle for your frame, take your local latitude. For us here in Lancaster County, that is 40 degrees, and add 15 degrees if you plan to dry mostly in the late summer and autumn. That gives us 55 degrees. That is the slope your glass must take. When you cut the 2 side pieces of your box, you are cutting a long, sloping wedge. The back wall should stand 30 inches high, while the front lip stands only 6 inches high. The length of the sides should be exactly 48 inches to accommodate a standard storm window pane. Use plain, untreated 1-inch white pine boards. Never use pressure-treated lumber for a food box. The chemicals used to keep the wood from rotting in the ground will leach into the hot air and coat your fruit. Understand this. We are building 2 distinct zones inside one single box. The lower half is the collector and the upper half is the drying chamber. For the lower 24 inches of the box, we create the heat engine. Cut a piece of thin sheet metal or heavy aluminum flashing to fit tightly between the sideboards. Paint this metal solid black using a flat, non-toxic high-heat paint, the kind used for wood stoves. Mount this black plate exactly 2 inches below the glass, leaving a 2-inch air gap beneath the metal plate as well. This creates a sandwich of air. When the sun hits that black metal through the glass, it gets hot enough to burn your fingers. The air directly above and below the plate heats up instantly, expands, and begins its race upward toward the high back wall. Now, at the very bottom front edge of the box, the 6-inch lip, you must cut a wide, horizontal slot across the entire width of the wood. This is the mouth of your dryer. Cover this slot with a fine stainless steel wire mesh or brass window screen. This lets the fresh, cool outside air in, but keeps out the yellow jackets, flies, and ants that are drawn to the scent of sweet fruit. As that fresh air enters the bottom slot, it is forced to travel along the hot black metal plate. By the time it travels 24 inches up the slope, its temperature has jumped from 80 degrees to nearly 140 degrees. It is now hot, dry, and hungry for moisture. This brings us to the upper 24 inches of the box, the drying chamber. Here you will nail small wooden cleats along the inside walls, spaced 3 inches apart, to hold your drying trays. The trays themselves are simple frames made of white pine strips, with food-safe fiberglass or stainless steel screening tacked to the bottom. Never use galvanized window screening for your trays. The zinc will react with the natural fruit acids and leave a metallic taste on your food. When you slide your trays into these cleats, you must leave a 2-inch gap at the front of the first tray and a 2-inch gap at the back of the second tray. This forces the rising hot air to snake back and forth across the food like a river bending through a meadow. It cannot just rush straight out the top without doing its work. Every single cubic inch of hot air must wipe across the top and bottom of your sliced apples or berries, carrying away the surface moisture before it escapes. At the very top of the 30-inch back wall, cut your exit vent, another wide slot covered in fine mesh. To control the temperature on exceptionally hot days, attach a simple wooden flap over this top vent with a leather hinge. If the box gets too hot, above 150 degrees, which can actually cook the fruit instead of drying it, you open the flap wide to let the air escape faster, which cools the interior. If the day is overcast and cool, you close the flap down to a crack, trapping the heat inside to maintain that critical drying temperature. Before you lay a single slice of fruit on these trays, there is one final preparation for the box itself. The outside of the pine boards must be painted a deep dark color, ideally a flat barn red or charcoal black. This ensures the wood walls themselves absorb the ambient heat of the day, insulating the interior against cool breezes. The inside of the upper drying chamber, however, should be left bare, clean, white pine. The bare wood absorbs any sudden bursts of humidity from the fruit, acting as a natural buffer that keeps the air inside perfectly balanced. Now that the structure is solid, look at your hands. They hold a tool that relies on no utility company, requires no maintenance, and functions entirely on the natural movement of the atmosphere. But the box is only half the battle. If you slice your fruit incorrectly, or if you load the trays at the wrong hour of the day, you will end up with a sticky, fermented mess instead of preserved bounty. Let me show you the old way of preparing the fruit. The natural dips we use to keep it bright without chemicals, and the precise moment of the morning when you must commit your harvest to the sun. When you take up your knife to prepare the harvest, stop and think about the moisture trapped inside that skin. An apple or a peach is mostly water, held tightly within cellular walls. If you slice the fruit too thick, the sun will dry the outside into a tough, impermeable shell, while the center remains wet. This is what we call case hardening. It looks dry to your eye, but within a week in the jar, that hidden inner moisture will seep out and turn your whole winter store into a moldy ruin. The rule for slicing is simple: 1/4 of an inch, no thicker. Use a sharp, thin-bladed knife or a simple wooden mandolin. Slice across the core to make round rings, or slice lengthwise into uniform wedges. The shape matters less than the consistency. If one slice is thick and another is thin, the thin one will turn to chips, while the thick one sits fermenting in its own sugars. I learned from Esther's grandmother that you must never load your trays under the heat of the midday sun. If you chop your fruit at noon and place it into a box that is already standing at 140 degrees, the sudden heat shocks the fruit, sealing the outer pores instantly and locking the water inside. Instead, you must load the trays early in the morning, just as the dew is drying off the grass, while the solar box is still cool from the night. This allows the fruit and the air inside the chamber to heat up together, slowly and in unison. The moisture expands gently and begins to draw out to the surface naturally as the sun climbs higher in the sky. Now, look at the color of your sliced apples. Left out in the open air, they will turn brown and dull within 15 minutes. Modern factories spray their fruit with sulfur dioxide or dip it in chemical preservatives to keep that unnatural artificial brightness. In our home, we do not use chemicals, but we do use a simple traditional dip that protects both the color and the vitamin C. Take a clean earthenware crock or a large glass bowl. Fill it with 1 gallon of cold spring water. To this, add 2 tablespoons of pure honey and the juice of 3 fresh lemons. If you do not have lemons, a cup of pure apple cider vinegar works just as well. The natural citric acid and the enzymes in the raw honey create a gentle barrier that slows down the oxidation without changing the honest taste of the fruit. Drop your slices into this bath as you cut them. Let them swim there for no more than 10 minutes. When you lift them out, do not crowd them onto the drying trays. Lay them out side by side, a finger's breadth apart. If the edges overlap, the air cannot pass between them, and those contact points will remain damp, sticky, and prone to spoilage. Once your trays are loaded, slide them into the chamber and close the glass lid tight. Turn the box so the glass faces directly south. In the morning, around 9 o'clock, the shadow of the box should fall straight behind it. As the sun moves through the sky, you will need to walk out to the yard once or twice to adjust the box, keeping it aimed squarely at the light. It takes only a moment, a brief pause in your day, to look up at the sky and align your work with the sun. By 2 o'clock in the afternoon, the heat inside will reach its peak. This is when you must watch the leather hinge on your top vent. If you look through the glass and see tiny droplets of water fogging the surface, the air is moving too slow. Open the top vent flap wider. You want that moist air to exit the box immediately, not linger on the glass and drip back down onto your clean trays. When the evening comes and the sun dips behind the tree line, the air inside the box will begin to cool. Do not leave your trays outside overnight. As the evening air chills, the humidity rises, and the dry fruit will act like a sponge, pulling that damp night air right back into its flesh, undoing all the work of the day. Lift the trays out of the chamber, carry them into the kitchen, and stack them on the table under a clean linen cloth. The next morning, as the sun rises, slide them back into the box for the final day of drying. How do you know when the work is truly finished? You do not guess, and you do not rely on a clock. You use the touch test that generations of market folks have trusted. Take a handful of the cooled slices and press them tightly together in your palm. Hold your fist closed for 5 seconds, then open your hand. If the slices stick together in a wet, gummy clump, they still hold too much water. Put them back in the box. If they fall apart instantly, rustling against each other like dry autumn leaves, they are ready. They should feel like a piece of fine, broken-in leather, pliant, soft, bending easily without snapping, but completely dry to the touch with no stickiness left on your skin. Now your harvest is preserved, independent of any machine or power grid. But if you take these dry slices and throw them straight into a tight jar immediately, you might still lose them all. There is one final crucial step that the old-timers called conditioning. a simple method of balancing the remaining moisture across the whole batch before it goes into the dark cellar for the winter. Let me walk you through this final storage secret. How we use simple glass jars to test the batch over 7 days, and how to keep your dried store perfectly sweet and safe until the first spring greens appear in the soil. When you take your dried fruit off the trays, understand this. Even if every piece feels dry to your touch, some slices will naturally hold a fraction more moisture than others. If you seal them into a jar immediately, that uneven moisture will concentrate in the small air pockets between the fruit, creating a perfect breeding ground for mold. To prevent this, our people use a simple method called conditioning. Take your dry fruit and pack it loosely into large, clean glass jars. Fill the jars about 2/3 of the way up, leaving plenty of empty space at the top. Screw the lids on tight and set the jars on your kitchen counter where you can see them every day. Twice a day, in the morning and the evening, walk over to the counter, pick up each jar, and give it a gentle shake. This moves the fruit around, forcing the completely dry slices to absorb any micro moisture from the slightly damp ones, balancing the entire batch perfectly. Keep these jars on your counter for exactly 7 days. Every morning, hold the glass up to the light and look closely at the inside of the jar. If you see even a faint film of fog or tiny beads of condensation forming on the glass, the fruit is not ready for the cellar. The sun's work was not quite finished. Take the fruit out immediately, spread it back onto the trays, and give it one more afternoon in the solar box. But if, after 7 days of shaking, the glass remains perfectly clear, bone dry, and the fruit moves freely inside without sticking to the walls, you have achieved a perfect cure. Now you can pack the fruit tightly into its final winter storage containers. Clean, dark glass jars are best, or simple tin canisters with tight-fitting lids. Store them in a cool, dark, dry place. A root cellar, a low shelf in a pantry, or a closet away from the chimney wall. Light and heat are the enemies of preserved food. They will fade the color and break down the natural sugars over time. A properly conditioned batch of solar-dried apples or peaches, stored this way, will keep its flavor, its texture, and its nutritional value for a full 12 months, carrying your family all the way to the next summer harvest. Stop and think about the math of this simple box. A standard electric dehydrator running for 24 hours consumes about 15 to 20 kilowatt hours of electricity. If you dry food regularly throughout the harvest season, that cost adds up on your monthly utility bill year after year. The solar box costs you nothing to run. It uses the free energy of the sun and the natural expansion of air to do the exact same work. If you build it well out of scrap lumber and an old window pane, the box pays for itself on the very first batch of fruit you preserve. But the real value is not found in the pennies you save on your electric bill. The real value is the independence it gives you. When you learn to work with the natural laws of temperature and airflow, you stop relying on complex machines that are designed to break down and force you to buy another plastic replacement. You become a producer instead of just a consumer. You learn to read the sky, to understand the path of the sun, and to trust the touch of your own hands. This solar box is just one of many forgotten solutions that our family uses to live comfortably and self-sufficiently on our farm. In our community, we do not reject new things because they are new. We keep the old things because they work better, last longer, and keep us connected to the land. Tell me in the comments below. Have you ever tried drying food using the power of the sun? What kind of traditional preservation methods did your parents or grandparents use when you were young? I read every single comment, and I treasure the old stories you share. In our next video, we are going to look at another simple traditional structure that every homestead needs before the winter frosts arrive. I will show you how to build a traditional earthen clamp, a simple underground storage system that keeps potatoes, carrots, and cabbage crisp and fresh through the freezing months without using a refrigerator or a basement cellar. We will talk about the exact depth to dig, the straw insulation layers, and how to protect your winter vegetables from rodents using nothing but local stone and natural materials. Subscribe so you do not miss it. Until then, take a look at your yard, find a spot that faces the southern sky, and think about how easy it is to build your own solar engine. Work with the sun, trust the old wisdom, and keep your harvests safe. When you look at your completed solar dryer sitting out in the grass, you are looking at more than just a wooden box. You are looking at a closed loop. The wood came from the earth, the sun powers the draft, and the dried fruit goes right back into nourishing your family. But to get the absolute most out of this traditional setup throughout the changing seasons, there are 3 advanced master keys of climate management you must understand down to your bones. Stop and think about the ambient air humidity. If you live in a region where the autumn morning mist hangs low over the fields until 10 o'clock, your solar box will struggle if you leave it sitting low to the ground. The grass transpires moisture constantly, creating a blanket of heavy, damp air right at the level of your bottom intake vent. I learned this the hard way during my third season using the box. A beautiful batch of late-season plums began to sour before noon because the air entering the slot was already saturated with meadow dew. The solution is simple old-world placement. Elevate the engine. Place your solar box on two sturdy wooden sawhorses or mount it on top of a south-facing stone wall, at least 3 feet off the ground. This simple adjustment lifts the intake vent out of the grass-level humidity zone, drawing in the crisper, drier air that circulates higher up. Understand this second key. Different fruits demand different air speeds. A thin slice of apple releases its water easily, but a thick, halved Italian prune plum or a heavy apricot holds its moisture like a fortress. If the air moves too fast over a heavy halved fruit, the skin will shrink and toughen, trapping the wet pulp inside forever. For these heavy, dense fruits, you must slow the air down to give the deep moisture time to migrate out to the surface. You do this by adjusting your top vent flap to a mere finger's width. This restricts the exit, holding the warm air inside the drying chamber a little longer. The internal temperature will rise by 5 to 10 degrees, creating a gentle, steady sauna effect that softens the dense flesh of the plums and coaxes the deep moisture out without hardening the outer skin. For light herbs like peppermint, thyme, or wild sage, you do the exact opposite. Herbs contain very little water but hold delicate aromatic oils that will vaporize and vanish if the box gets too hot. For them, you open the top vent completely wide and tilt the box slightly away from the direct noon sun. You want maximum airflow with minimal heat, a brisk, warm breeze that chips the leaves dry in a single afternoon while keeping their deep green color and potent medicine intact. The third key is the late-season slate trick. When October arrives in Lancaster County, the sun loses its summer bite and the afternoons grow short. To extend the drying power of your box into the cold edge of autumn, walk down to an old barn or an old homestead site and find 2 or 3 flat pieces of dark roofing slate or heavy river stones. Place these stones directly inside the upper drying chamber, right on the floor beneath your lowest tray. During the peak hours of the midday sun, these heavy stones will absorb the excess heat, acting like a natural thermal battery. When the sun begins to drop at 3 o'clock and the outside air cools rapidly, those hidden stones will slowly radiate their stored heat back into the box for an extra 2 hours. This simple trick keeps the internal draft moving long after the sky has turned gray, giving you just enough extra time to finish a late batch of wild cranberries or winter pears when you pack your tools away at the end of the harvest season. You clean the empty pine trays with a simple cloth dipped in warm water and a little white vinegar. Never use harsh soap or chemical bleach on the bare wood. The pine will hold that chemical scent all winter and give it right back to your first batch of sweet strawberries next June. Store the box inside a dry barn or shed. Tilt it upside down so no dust settles on the interior glass. Look down at the jars sitting on your shelf, glowing with the deep amber colors of autumn. You did not buy them from a factory across the ocean. You did not pay a monthly bill to keep them from rotting. You simply stepped into your yard, listened to the old market wisdom, and let the great weight of the atmosphere do the heavy lifting for you. That is the quiet satisfaction of the old path. It takes a few minutes longer to learn. It takes a little patience to watch the sky. But the independence it leaves you with is something that no store-bought machine can ever provide. Go out to your workshop, find a few clean boards, look up at the southern